Welcome to Lazy People Boring History Channel. Let's sleep together by hearing this story. Out in pale clouds, as the world holds its silence, you can hear snow squeak softly under your feet, that strange dry sound that only comes when cold digs deep into the ground. There is no cabin, no stone hearth, no orange glow of a radiator waiting to rescue you, and yet, you are alive. Not barely alive either, but alert, breathing steadily, wrapped in something older than comfort, and far older than central heating. You probably will not survive this, at least not the way you are right now, with your modern habits and your expectation that warmth should always be one switch away. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, while you are settling in, maybe drop a comment with where you are listening from, and what time it is there. Midnight in Toronto, early evening in Sydney, a quiet afternoon somewhere warm, where winter feels theoretical. Now, dim the lights, and let your shoulders drop as you imagine stepping backward in time, into a winter that has no heating system waiting in reserve. You wake before sunrise, because cold does not let you sleep long. It nudges you awake, not cruelly, just persistently. The air presses against your skin, sharp but clean, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from a fire that burned low hours ago, and was never meant to last all night. That is your first lesson. Prehistoric people did not think of heat the way you do. They did not aim to banish cold completely. They learned to live alongside it. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly into the scene. Archaeological evidence shows that early humans survived repeated ice age cycles for tens of thousands of years, long before permanent fireplaces became common. This is not a mystery, just a reality that feels uncomfortable from a modern sofa. The cold was not an emergency, it was the background condition of life. You shift your weight, stamping your feet, feeling blood move. That movement is not an accident. Stillness is dangerous here. Your ancestors learned that warmth could be made inside the body as much as outside it. You probably think fire is the hero of this story. But fire is expensive. It eats fuel, demands attention, and gives away your location. In deep prehistory, fire was often used sparingly, saved for cooking, tool-making, or brief bursts of warmth rather than endless burning through the night. There is a quirky tidbit that tends to surprise people. Some archaeologists believe that certain prehistoric groups intentionally let fires die overnight, trusting their bodies, their shelter, and their shared warmth to carry them through until morning. It sounds reckless, almost masochistic, but it worked often enough to become tradition. You look around at the others waking with you. No one complains about the cold. Complaining would waste energy. Instead, there is quiet efficiency. Someone feeds a few twigs into the embers, coaxing a low flame, just enough to take the edge off the morning air. Someone else checks a simple windbreak made of branches and hides, angled carefully to block the worst gusts. This is not comfort, as you know it. This is competence. Historians still argue whether early humans consciously trained themselves to tolerate cold, or whether natural selection simply removed those who could not adapt. The debate is polite but unresolved, and you can feel it in your bones as you breathe deeply and let the cold settle rather than fight it. You notice something else. The cold here feels different from the cold you know. There is no damp chill creeping through thin walls, no draft sneaking under a door. The air is dry, honest. It stings, yes, but it does not linger. You realize how much of your modern discomfort comes from fighting environments your body did not evolve to handle. Central heating dries the air, confuses your senses, and leaves you strangely fragile once you step outside. A gentle sarcasm creeps in as you imagine explaining this morning to someone back home. No, there is no thermostat. No, there is no blanket fresh from the dryer. And yet, somehow, life continues. You bend down, brushing snow from a patch of ground worn smooth by repeated use. This spot has been slept on for generations. The earth here is slightly warmer than the air, holding on to yesterday's sun and the body heat of those who came before you. Even now, without realizing it, you are learning to read warmth in subtle places. Your hands tingle, then slowly numb, then settle into a steady, manageable cold. Panic would make it worse. Calm lets your circulation adjust. This, too, was learned. Children growing up in these conditions did not experience cold as trauma. It was normal. Their bodies responded efficiently, shunting blood where it was needed, and conserving heat where it mattered most. You catch the faint smell of animal hide, oiled and smoked, wrapped loosely around your shoulders. It is not tailored, there are no neat seams or buttons, but it blocks wind, traps air, and moves with you. Later, much later, people would invent buildings designed to trap heat continuously. For now, warmth travels with you. As the sky lightens, you feel something unexpected. Not misery, not heroism, but a quiet confidence. Winter is not an enemy to be conquered, it is a condition to be understood. Prehistoric people did not need heating in the way you think, because they did not design their lives around permanent indoor warmth. They designed themselves, their movements, and their expectations around cold. You take one last breath of the icy air, steady and slow, and begin to move with the others as the day starts. The story does not pause here, it flows forward, step by careful step, deeper into how bodies, habits, and landscapes work together to make winter survivable, without glowing radiators or humming furnaces. You keep moving as the light grows stronger, and you begin to notice something about your own body. It is not shutting down, it is not begging for rescue, it is adjusting. Your breathing settles into a rhythm that feels almost meditative, and the cold that once seemed sharp now feels manageable, even familiar. This is where the story turns inward. Because prehistoric survival in winter was not just about shelters or fires, it was about bodies that knew how to exist in cold without panicking. You roll your shoulders and feel heat bloom deep inside your chest, spreading slowly outward. This warmth is not borrowed from a flame. It is made by muscle, blood, and metabolism. A well-known historical fact slips in quietly here. Human bodies generate heat constantly through movement and digestion, and early humans relied heavily on this internal furnace. Studies of modern cold-adapted populations show higher baseline metabolic rates in winter, something your ancestors likely shared without ever naming it. You pause, letting your weight settle evenly on your feet. Your toes sting less now. The initial shock has passed. This is not magic. It is physiology. Blood vessels near your skin constrict slightly, reducing heat loss, while deeper circulation keeps your core warm. You do not think about it, you simply feel steadier. There is a strange comfort in realizing that your body is not as helpless as modern life suggests. You have been trained to outsource warmth, turn a knob, flip a switch, wrap yourself in artificial heat until your own systems grow lazy. Prehistoric people did the opposite. Their bodies were the first line of defense. A quirky detail drifts in like a half-remembered campfire story. Some researchers suspect that prehistoric humans may have intentionally exposed themselves to cold during certain parts of the day, much like modern cold water swimmers, to keep their tolerance high. There is no written record, of course, but wear patterns on tools and seasonal camp layouts suggest people spent more time outdoors than comfort would strictly require. You imagine a child growing up here. No heated nursery, no thick walls keeping the world out. From infancy, cold is simply part of sensation, like sound or light. That child learns early that shivering is not failure, it is communication. Muscles vibrate to make heat. The body speaks, and the child listens. You flex your fingers and notice how dexterity returns once you stop fighting the cold. Panic makes you clumsy. Calm restores control. This lesson mattered. Dropping a tool in winter could mean wasted energy or lost food. Survival favored those who could stay composed when their skin went numb. There is an ongoing scholarly disagreement about how much of this tolerance was biological versus cultural. Some experts argue that genetic adaptation played a major role, pointing to differences in body shape and circulation. Others suggest that behavior and lifelong conditioning mattered more than DNA. The truth likely sits somewhere in between, and you feel that ambiguity in your own imagined muscles as they warm with use. You walk with the group, matching pace. No one rushes. No one drags behind. This steady movement is warmth. Your thighs and calves generate heat with every step, sending it upward. You realize that sitting still for long periods would be a mistake. Rest happens later, carefully timed and well supported. Your breath fogs the air in slow pulses. You notice the smell of frost and earth, clean and faintly metallic. Cold sharpens senses. Sounds carry farther. You hear a distant crack as ice shifts along a riverbank. You are alert, but not tense. Modern aside slips in gently. Think about how cold feels when you step outside from a heated building. The shock is violent. Your body scrambles because it has not been practicing. Here, there is no shock, just continuity. Indoors and outdoors are not radically different worlds. They blend into each other. You remember that the body loses most heat through the head and extremities. Without knowing anatomy, prehistoric people learned this through experience. They wrapped hands, covered heads, and kept feet moving. Heat conservation became instinct, not instruction. There is another understated fact worth noticing. Body composition mattered. People with slightly higher body fat had an advantage in cold climates, not as excess, but as insulation. This did not mean obesity as you imagine it today. It meant resilience. Seasonal weight gain was normal and useful. You glance down at your arms, imagining them stronger, denser, built from constant physical work. Muscle mass itself produces heat. A sedentary winter was not an option. Food gathering, tool making, and shelter maintenance all required motion. Warmth came as a byproduct of living. Some anthropologists debate whether early humans consciously understood their bodies as heat systems, or simply acted through tradition. Did they know why movement mattered, or did they just know that it worked? The distinction may not matter. Knowledge does not always need words. The cold breeze picks up briefly, sliding under your hide wrap. You adjust it without thinking, turning your body slightly away from the wind. Micro adjustments like this saved energy over long days. Facing the wind directly would drain you faster. You learn to angle yourself, to cooperate with the weather instead of challenging it. You feel a quiet respect growing for these bodies, including your own. They were not superhuman. They were trained, conditioned, and trusted. They were allowed to do what they evolved to do. As the sun climbs a little higher, you notice that you are no longer thinking about being cold. The sensation fades into the background, replaced by the rhythm of movement and breath. This is not comfort in the modern sense, but it is stability. You continue forward, body warm from within, ready to learn how everything else around you helped hold on to that heat. The ground, the shelters, the shared space, all of it builds on this foundation. A body that knows how to stay warm without asking permission from a machine. You feel it most clearly when you pause for a moment, hands resting on your sides, breath steady. There is a gentle weight to your body now, not heaviness exactly, but substance. The cold presses in, yet it does not cut as sharply as it once did. This is where fat enters the story, not as an insult or a failure of discipline, but as a quiet ally that prehistoric people depended on without apology. You brush snow from your forearm and imagine the layers beneath the skin. Fat slows heat loss. It softens the boundary between warm blood and cold air. This is not speculation. The archaeological record and studies of human biology both point to the same conclusion. In colder regions, prehistoric populations tended to carry slightly more body fat than those living closer to the equator. It was not excess, it was insurance. You probably grew up hearing that fat is something to be burned away, trimmed down, controlled. Out here, in this imagined winter, that idea feels almost comical. A little extra padding means you can sit longer, sleep deeper, and survive lean days when movement must slow. It means your body cools more slowly when the wind picks up. You think about food now, because fat does not appear by accident. It comes from diet. Prehistoric winter diets were often rich and dense, heavy on animal fats, marrow, and organs that modern tastes sometimes avoid. Bones cracked open for the creamy richness inside were not desperation meals. They were prized. There is a detail that does not always make it into tidy history books. Some hunter-gatherer groups deliberately targeted the fattiest animals before winter set in, even passing over leaner prey. They understood, in their own practical way, that calories were not all equal. Fat burned longer. It warmed you from the inside out. You imagine sitting close to others, passing around chunks of roasted meat, fingers slick with grease. It smells rich and smoky. That smell lingers on your hands, on your clothes, and even in your hair. Later, as you lie down to sleep, digestion will do part of the work that fire does in your world. Breaking down food releases heat. Eating at the right time mattered. This is not romantic fantasy. Evidence from cut marks on bones and the distribution of animal remains shows clear patterns of fat processing in prehistoric camps. People went out of their way to extract every usable calorie. They were not gluttons. They were planners. You feel the warmth spread through your core as you imagine that meal settling. It is slow, steady, and reliable. Unlike fire, which flares and fades, metabolic heat lasts through the night. This mattered when fuel was scarce or weather made fire risky. There is still lively disagreement among researchers about how intentional these dietary strategies were. Some argue that early humans simply ate what was available and benefited by coincidence. Others believe there was clear seasonal knowledge guiding food choices, passed down through generations. The truth likely lives in daily practice, rather than conscious theory. You shift your weight again, and feel how the cold interacts differently with different parts of your body. Your torso stays warm longest, your limbs cool faster. Fat distribution plays a role here too. Core warmth keeps organs functioning, even when fingers and toes go numb. Survival does not require comfort everywhere at once. A modern aside drifts in softly. Think about how uncomfortable you feel skipping a meal on a cold day. Hunger amplifies chill. Prehistoric people knew this. Without needing words for blood sugar or metabolism, feeding the body was feeding the fire within. Children learned this early. They watched adults prioritize certain foods in winter, watched elders insist that everyone eat before sleeping. It was not indulgence. It was survival etiquette. No one boasted about being thin when snow covered the ground. You imagine an older member of the group, face lined, hands steady, choosing the fattiest portion for a pregnant woman or a growing child. Social rules around food distribution helped regulate warmth across the group. Those who needed insulation most often received it. This is where social history quietly intertwines with biology. Fat was not just stored under skin, it was managed through relationships. Sharing food meant sharing warmth in advance. There is an unexpected psychological effect too. When you are well fed, cold feels less threatening. Anxiety drops. Movements become more deliberate, less rushed. Panic burns energy, calm preserves it. Full bellies supported steady minds. Some anthropologists point out that winter feasting rituals may have served both nutritional and emotional purposes. Eating together reinforced bonds while building reserves. You feel that sense of safety now, imagining yourself surrounded by others who have eaten the same meal, carrying the same warmth into the night. Your body, slightly heavier than a modern ideal, feels right for the season. You are not sluggish, you are prepared. The cold no longer feels like an invader. It feels like a condition you are equipped to handle. As you start walking again, boots crunching softly over frost, you notice that you are not shivering. Not yet. Your internal fire hums along, fueled by fat and habit. Fire outside may come later, briefly, but for now, warmth rides with you. You move forward, understanding that insulation was not just something worn or built. It was grown, eaten, and shared. And with each step, the lesson settles deeper. Winter survival began beneath the skin, long before walls or chimneys ever existed. You feel it the moment the group slows too much. The cold starts to creep back in, subtle at first, like a polite reminder. Muscles cool, fingers stiffen, someone shifts their stance. And without a word, the pace resumes. This is not impatience, it is understanding. For prehistoric people, movement was warmth, and stillness was something you earned carefully, not something you indulged in by default. You walk, and the rhythm of your steps becomes its own kind of shelter. Each footfall sends a small pulse of heat upward through your legs. Your arms swing naturally, not to burn calories but to keep blood flowing. This is not exercise as you know it. There is no separation between activity and survival. Movement is simply how you exist. Evidence from wear patterns on ancient joints and bones shows that early humans were almost constantly active throughout the day, even in winter. This was not frantic motion, it was steady, purposeful activity, tool making, food preparation, checking traps, repairing shelters. All of it required hands and bodies to stay in motion. Warmth came as a side effect of living. You notice how no one sits down unless there is a reason. When rest happens, it is deliberate. People crouch close to the ground, knees tucked in, arms wrapped around themselves or others. Even resting positions are chosen to conserve heat. Stretching out flat on cold earth would bleed warmth too quickly. There is a small detail that feels almost clever when you notice it. Tasks are arranged to keep people moving during the coldest parts of the day. Early mornings and late afternoons are busy. The quiet moments come when the sun is highest. Even if it offers little warmth, time itself is managed as a resource. You imagine explaining this to someone used to winter weekends spent under blankets. The idea that rest could be dangerous feels backwards, and yet here, sitting still too long invites cold to settle into joints and bones. Movement keeps the body honest. Children learn this quickly. They are not told to sit quietly for long stretches. They are encouraged to help, to carry small loads, to mimic adult tasks, not as labor, but as participation. A moving child stays warmer and learns the rhythms of the group. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about whether prehistoric people experienced winter fatigue the way modern humans do. Some argue that constant activity would have been exhausting. Others suggest that bodies conditioned from birth adapted efficiently, avoiding the sharp contrast between inactivity and exertion that tires you out today. You feel inclined to believe the latter as your imagined body settles into its pace. You stop briefly to gather firewood, hands moving quickly, breaking twigs, stacking them under one arm. Even this small pause is active. Fingers work, muscles engage. You do not linger. A modern aside slips in softly. Think about standing still at a bus stop in winter. The cold feels brutal. Now think about walking briskly toward it. The temperature does not change, but your experience does. Prehistoric life leaned hard into that difference. You notice how tasks are shared. No one person does everything. Rotating responsibilities keeps everyone warm, without overtaxing any single body. This social choreography matters. A person forced to stay still, while others move would chill faster and weaken. There is a subtle hierarchy here too. Elders move less, but they are placed closer to shared warmth, and given tasks that keep their hands busy. Young adults take on the longer walks and heavier lifting. Care is practical, not sentimental. Some anthropologists point to this constant movement as a reason early humans had such strong musculoskeletal systems. Bone density responds to stress. Muscles respond to use. Winter did not soften people, it reinforced them. You feel your own posture adjusting. You lean slightly forward against the cold. Spine aligned, steps efficient. Wasted motion costs energy. Sloppy movement burns heat without purpose. Over generations, efficiency becomes habit. There is a faint sound of laughter nearby. Someone slips slightly on ice and recovers with a grin. Humor survives here too, carried along by motion. Spirits stay warmer when bodies do. You realize that fire, when it appears, is often a brief pause rather than a destination. People warm their hands, adjust gear, eat quickly, then move again. Fires do not anchor the day, they punctuate it. This challenges the image of prehistoric life as people huddled endlessly around flames. In reality, fire was one tool among many. The body itself did much of the work, as long as it was kept in motion. You think about sleep now, and how even that will involve movement before rest. Bedding will be prepared, hides shaken out, positions adjusted. Falling asleep cold is risky. You arrive at rest warm, not hoping to become warm later. There is still debate about how much of this constant activity was choice versus necessity. Did people move because they understood warmth, or because survival tasks demanded it? As before, the distinction blurs. Understanding often grows out of doing. Your breathing deepens as the walk continues. The cold air feels less sharp now, filtered through steady lungs. Sweat does not build. Overheating would be just as dangerous. Layers are adjusted constantly, loosened and tightened as needed. Comfort here is dynamic, not fixed. You slow slightly as terrain changes, stepping carefully over frozen ground. Even caution is a form of engagement. Attention keeps you alert, and alertness keeps you alive. As the group moves toward the next task, you sense how deeply movement is woven into winter survival. Not as punishment, not as exercise, but as warmth itself. The idea of sitting still for hours would seem strange here, even reckless. You keep walking, heat humming through your muscles, understanding now that in a world without heaters, life itself had to keep moving, and as long as it did, winter could be endured, one steady step at a time. You slow as the land dips slightly, and the group angles toward a low structure half hidden by snow and brush. From a distance it barely looks like anything at all, just a dark shape pressed into the ground. As you draw closer, you understand, this is shelter, but not in the modern sense. There are no walls meant to impress, no height meant to create space. Everything here is deliberately small. You duck instinctively as you enter. Your shoulders brush rough wood and stretched hide. The ceiling sits low enough that standing upright would be awkward. And yet, the moment you are inside, you feel it. The air is calmer. The wind loses its voice. The cold no longer wraps around you so aggressively. Shape, it turns out, is warmth. Archaeological remains from prehistoric winter shelters show a consistent pattern. Low profiles, rounded forms, entrances positioned away from prevailing winds. These were not accidents. Over generations, people learned that tall spaces are hard to heat and easy to chill. Warm air rises and escapes. Cold air rushes in to replace it. So, shelters were designed to hug the ground, trapping warmth where bodies actually were. You crouch near the center and notice how close everyone is. There is no wasted volume. Every breath adds a little warmth. Every body contributes. The structure does not try to fight the environment. It works with it, redirecting airflow and minimizing exposure. There is a detail that often surprises people studying these sites. Many shelters were not built to last for years. They were seasonal, rebuilt, or repaired as needed. This allowed designs to evolve quickly. If something worked better, it was copied. If it failed, it was abandoned. Winter was an unforgiving teacher. You run your hand along the inner wall. It is layered, branches, packed earth, animal hide. Each layer slows heat loss. No single material does the job alone. Together, they create a buffer between warm bodies and cold air. Some researchers suggest that the emotional comfort of these tight spaces mattered as much as the physical warmth. Being close to others reduced fear. Fear burns energy. Calm conserves it. When the wind howls outside and the shelter holds, trust builds. You imagine a storm passing over this place, snow piling up against the outer walls. From the inside, the shelter grows quieter, not colder. Snow becomes insulation, sealing gaps and muting sound. What looks like burial from the outside feels like protection from within. This is where modern assumptions often fail. Bigger is not better in winter. Spaciousness is a luxury that requires fuel. Without constant heating, large rooms are liabilities. Prehistoric people understood this intuitively. They lived where their heat was. There is still disagreement about how standardized these shelter designs were across different regions. Some archaeologists see strong local traditions. Others point to shared principles appearing independently in distant places. Either way, the logic remains consistent. Control the shape, and you control the cold. You notice how the entrance is narrow and slightly offset. Cold air sinks and slides along the ground. A straight doorway would invite it inside. This small turn forces air to slow and mix before reaching the living space. It is simple, but effective. You sit down, knees drawn up, back against the wall. The earth feels cool, but not freezing. The ground holds heat longer than air, especially when packed and covered. This shelter is not floating above the world. It is part of it. There is a faint smell of smoke embedded in everything. Fires have burned here before, not constantly, but often enough to dry materials and add a lingering warmth. Smoke also deters insects and preserves hides. Every choice serves multiple purposes. Children crawl easily in this space. Elders lean against walls, conserving energy. No one complains about the lack of headroom. Comfort here is measured in survival, not convenience. You think about how strange this would feel to someone used to modern architecture. Low ceilings might feel oppressive at first, but after a while, the sense of enclosure becomes calming. The world outside feels distant. Inside, warmth feels shared and secure. Some anthropologists argue that these shelters influence social behavior. Close quarters forced cooperation. Conflict wasted warmth and space. Winter demanded tolerance. You feel that pressure now. The quiet understanding that harmony is not optional. You listen to the muffled sounds outside. Wind, snow shifting. The shelter absorbs it all. Inside, voices stay low. Loud noise escapes heat as much as it escapes sound. This is not a place for pacing or standing tall. It is a place for stillness, earned through earlier movement. Rest here feels safe because everything else has been arranged to support it. You begin to understand that shelter was not about escaping winter, but shaping a small pocket within it. The cold still exists. It is just held at a distance. As you settle in, the group begins quiet tasks, repairing tools, sharing food, tending embers briefly, before letting them fade. The shelter holds onto the warmth left behind. You breathe deeply. Air slightly warmer now, less biting. The shape around you does the work silently. No fuel burned, no flames needed. When you eventually step back outside, the contrast will be sharp again, but you will carry the memory of this space, proof that winter could be negotiated, not conquered, with nothing more than thoughtful design and shared bodies. You rise, ducking once more, and move on with the others, knowing that warmth is not always something you add. Sometimes it is something you simply refuse to let escape. You step back out into the open, and the cold meets you again, familiar now rather than shocking. The group does not travel far before stopping at a place that looks almost unremarkable, a slight rise in the ground, a shallow depression, ringed with stones. At first glance, it seems exposed. Then you kneel and press your palm to the soil. It is not warm exactly, but it is steadier than the air. The earth holds yesterday in it. Sunlight, footfalls, bodies resting, all of it lingers just below the surface. This is another quiet secret of winter survival. The ground is not the enemy. In many cases, it is the blanket. Evidence from prehistoric camps shows repeated use of the same ground surfaces, packed down intentionally over time. Layers of grass, reeds, bark, and hide were added, then compressed by bodies night after night. The result was a dense, insulating mat that separated people from frozen soil without lifting them into colder air above. You settle down slowly, feeling the give beneath you. It molds slightly to your shape, reducing gaps where cold air could circulate. Modern mattresses aim for softness. This aims for contact. The more surface area touches, the less heat escapes. There is a detail often overlooked. Many prehistoric shelters and sleeping areas were partially dug into the ground, not deep enough to feel buried, but enough to take advantage of stable underground temperatures. Even in harsh winters, soil just below the surface stays warmer than open air. You feel that difference now as the wind brushes past your face, but your back stays comparatively calm. Some archaeologists describe these spaces as earth-hugging. They were not elevated or grand. They were practical. People lived close to the thermal mass of the planet itself. You think about how strange it is that modern homes often lift us away from the ground. Raised floors, crawl spaces, basements sealed off. It makes sense for plumbing and cleanliness, but it also removes a steady source of thermal stability. Prehistoric people did not have that option, and in winter, that limitation became an advantage. You reach down and scrape away a bit of snow. Beneath it, the soil is damp, but not frozen solid. Snow, counterintuitively, insulates. It traps air. A thick layer of snow over ground prevents deeper freezing. People learned this by experience, not theory. A snow-covered spot was often warmer than bare ground, swept clean by wind. There is a small but fascinating observation from field studies. In some regions, prehistoric people appeared to pile snow deliberately against shelters. What looks like neglect or collapse may actually have been design. Snow sealed cracks, blocked drafts, and added insulation without effort. You lie back briefly, staring up at the pale sky. Your body heat seeps downward, not disappearing, but pooling gently. When you shift, you can feel warmth lingering where you were moments before. The earth remembers you. This does not mean the ground was always safe. Frozen soil can steal heat quickly if not prepared properly. This is where layering mattered. Hides, grasses, even dry leaves created a buffer. The key was dryness. Wet ground is dangerous. Water conducts heat away fast. Winter camps were chosen carefully to avoid dampness. Researchers still disagree on how much planning went into site selection versus tradition. Did people understand moisture and insulation explicitly? Or did they simply return to places that felt better? Either way, the knowledge accumulated. You imagine elders pointing to a spot and nodding, not explaining, just knowing. This place works. That one does not. Children learn by sleeping well or sleeping cold. Lessons sink in quickly when your comfort depends on them. Over time, preferences become rules, and rules become habit. There is a quiet psychological comfort in pressing against the ground. It feels solid, reliable. The wind may scream above you, but the earth does not move. It anchors you. You notice how people position themselves close together on this packed surface, sharing not only body heat but also the insulated zone created by repeated use. The center stays warmer, edges are cooler, Sleeping arrangements reflect this. Those who need more warmth sleep closer in. You think again about fire. Fire rises. Heat from fire escapes upward. Heat from bodies pressed to earth stays closer. In winter, low heat is more useful than high flames. A faint smell of soil mixes with hide and smoke. It is not unpleasant. It is grounding, literally. Some anthropologists suggest that this closeness to the ground influenced worldview. Living with the earth rather than above it. You feel a trace of that now. Lying low, listening to the muted world around you. When you stand again, your legs feel stiff for a moment, then warm as blood moves. The ground releases you reluctantly, like a memory letting go. You move on with a new appreciation. Warmth did not always come from above or from fire. Often, it rose gently from beneath, borrowed from the planet itself. As you walk, the lesson settles in. Prehistoric people did not float through winter. They pressed into it. They leaned on soil, stone, and snow, letting the earth do part of the work, and in doing so, they found warmth where you might never think to look. You notice the sounds before anything else. A low rustle, a warm animal smell, mixed with damp fur and earth. This is not fear you feel, but familiarity. The group moves calmly, adjusting direction slightly, and soon you understand why. Winter is not lived alone here. Other creatures are close, sometimes closer than you might expect. You pause near a rocky outcrop where signs of life are everywhere. Flattened grass, dark pellets in the snow, a shallow hollow pressed into the ground. Animals shelter here too, and in winter, their needs often overlap with yours. Warmth gathers where bodies gather. Evidence from prehistoric sites shows repeated proximity between humans and animals during cold seasons, not always as hunters and prey, but as neighbors. Caves, rock shelters, and tree-lined hollows were shared spaces, sometimes at different hours, sometimes at the same time. The cold pushed everyone toward the same solutions. You imagine bedding down near a cave wall still warm from a bear that moved on hours earlier. It sounds dangerous through modern ears, but context matters. These encounters were not careless. People read signs, freshness, smell, tracks. They knew when a space was safe and when it was not. There is a curious observation from cave archaeology. In some sites, animal and human sleeping areas overlap in ways that suggest alternating use rather than conflict. One group leaves warmth behind, another benefits. Heat lingers longer than presence. You crouch and feel the ground near a rock face. It is warmer here, shielded from wind, insulated by mass. Animals choose these spots for the same reason you do. Survival teaches similar lessons across species. Children grow up seeing this coexistence. Animals are not abstract threats. They are part of the winter landscape. Sometimes dangerous, sometimes useful, always instructive. Watching where animals rest teaches humans where warmth hides. There is still no intentional this proximity was. Some argue humans deliberately sought animal shelters for residual warmth. Others suggest overlap was unavoidable in limited winter refuges. Either way, the result was shared heat, even if only indirectly. You notice feathers tucked into bedding, fur lining a cloak, bones arranged as wind breaks. Animals contribute warmth even when absent. Nothing is wasted. Winter encourages pragmatism. A modern aside drifts in quietly. Think about how much heat a dog gives off when it curls beside you on a cold night. Multiply that by generations of observation, and you begin to understand why prehistoric people paid close attention to animal behavior. In some regions, people may have slept near livestock or semi-domesticated animals much earlier than commonly assumed. Not for affection, but for survival. Bodies are heaters, living ones especially. You feel the air grow calmer as you move closer to the rock wall. Wind skims over the surface instead of reaching you. Animals knew this. You are learning it too. There is a faint sound nearby. A snort, a shifting weight. You tense briefly, then relax as you recognize the rhythm. This animal is resting, not hunting. Winter lowers aggression. Energy is precious for everyone. Some anthropologists suggest that this shared winter pressure reduced conflict between species, at least temporarily. Hunger makes predators bold, but extreme cold makes everyone cautious. Risk is expensive. You imagine the smell inside a shared shelter. Earthy, musky, smoky, not pleasant by modern standards, but reassuring. Smell is information. It tells you who was here and how recently. You notice how people position themselves carefully, not blocking exits, not cornering animals. Respect is practical. Panic wastes heat. Calm preserves it. There is an unspoken understanding here. Winter forces cooperation, even across species boundaries. Warmth does not care who produces it. You settle near the group, backs to stone, bodies close. The combined heat builds slowly, subtly. It is not dramatic. It is enough. As night deepens, the sounds of animals fade into the background, part of the same quiet world you occupy. No clear line separates human space from animal space. Both are shaped by cold. You close your eyes briefly and feel the shared warmth hold. Prehistoric people did not survive winter alone because they did not have to. The landscape was alive, breathing, radiating heat in small, precious pockets. When you rise again, moving on with the others, you carry this lesson with you. Warmth was not always made. Often, it was borrowed, shared, and respected. And in winter, that made all the difference. You adjust the weight on your shoulders, tugging the rough material closer around your chest. There are no stitches here, no neat seams, no careful tailoring. And yet, the warmth is real. Clothing comes into focus now, not as fashion or even craftsmanship, but as a practical response to cold that predates needles by thousands of years. You feel the texture of hide against your skin. It is uneven, thicker in some places, softer in others. This is not a flaw. Variation traps air. Air, when held still, is one of the best insulators available. Long before anyone learned to sew fitted garments, prehistoric people understood that wrapping mattered more than shaping. Archaeological finds from Paleolithic sites include scrapers and stone tools used specifically for hide processing. This tells a clear story. People invested time and energy into preparing animal skins, removing flesh, softening fibers, and preserving flexibility. Clothing was not an afterthought. It was essential winter equipment. You notice how the hide is worn loosely, draped rather than cinched. Tight clothing compresses air pockets and lets heat escape. Loose layers allow warmth to linger. Modern winter jackets follow the same principle, even if the materials have changed. There is a lesser-known detail that often surprises people. Early clothing likely involved more tying and wrapping than sewing. Strips of leather, plant fibers, or sinew held pieces in place temporarily. This allowed garments to be adjusted easily as conditions changed. Too warm, loosen it. Too cold, overlap another layer. You imagine someone helping another secure a cloak, hands quick and practiced. Clothing here is communal knowledge. Everyone knows how to wrap, how to adjust, how to share. A poorly wrapped hide is a liability. A well-wrapped one is safety. You feel the difference immediately when you turn your back to the wind. The hide breaks the flow of air, slowing heat loss. Wind chill matters. Blocking wind can make freezing air feel survivable. Prehistoric people paid close attention to this, choosing materials that shed gusts, rather than letting them pass through. Some researchers believe that early humans may have used animal fat, rubbed into hides to improve water resistance and flexibility. This would help keep garments dry in snow and sleet. Dry insulation works. Wet insulation fails. You can sense the wisdom in that, as you imagine damp cold seeping in. There is still debate about when true sewn clothing emerged. Bone needles appear relatively late in the archaeological record, but warmth did not wait for precision tools. Wrapping, layering, and knotting carried people through winters, long before fine stitching existed. You think about children learning this skill, watching adults wrap themselves, imitating movements, practicing knots, mistakes corrected gently, because mistakes cost warmth. Over time, the body learns what feels right. A modern aside slips in softly. Think about how uncomfortable a stiff winter coat feels until it breaks in. These hides are already broken in by life. They move with you. They smell of smoke and animal and earth. Familiar scents bring comfort. You notice how clothing overlaps with bedding. The same hides used during the day become part of the sleeping arrangement at night. Nothing is single purpose. Versatility reduces the need for excess, which reduces weight and effort. Some anthropologists suggest that early clothing choices influence social identity. Certain furs or skins may have signaled skill or status, but in winter, function dominated. Warmth flattened hierarchy. Everyone needed it. You brush snow from your garment and feel it slide off rather than soak in. Treatment matters. Preparation matters. Clothing is technology, even if it does not look like it. As you move, the hide creaks softly. Sound is another consideration. Quiet movement conserves energy and avoids unnecessary attention. Heavy, stiff garments would have been avoided when possible. You feel your body temperature stabilize again, helped by this simple barrier. No buttons, no zippers, just material, air, and understanding. You realize now that prehistoric people did not wait for perfect solutions. They used what they had, refined it through experience, and trusted it. Clothing did not need to be elegant to be effective. As you walk on, wrapped in something made by hands long gone, you feel the quiet continuity of knowledge. Warmth passed down not through manuals, but through touch, habit, and shared survival. The cold still exists. It always will. But with each layer, each adjustment, it loses a little of its power, and you keep moving forward, carrying warmth with you, even without a single stitch holding it all together. You become more aware of texture now than shape. As you move, your fingers brush different surfaces, each one doing quiet work against the cold. Fur, feathers, rough plant fibers, even the friction between layers matters. Warmth here is not a single thing. It is the sum of many small resistances, slowing the escape of heat. You notice how fur is worn with the hair facing inward or outward depending on need. Hair turned inward traps air close to the skin. Turned outward, it sheds snow and blocks wind. This choice is not random, it reflects long observation. People learned how materials behaved by wearing them through seasons, storms, and long nights. Evidence from animal remains and tool marks shows selective use of pelts. Thick winter coats from animals were valued differently than summer skins. Not all fur is equal. Some compress easily and lose insulation. Others stay springy, holding air even when damp. You feel the difference as you adjust a layer, choosing softness over stiffness. Feathers play a role too, though they rarely survive in the archaeological record. Lightweight and exceptional at trapping air, feathers likely filled bedding, lined clothing, or padded sleeping areas. Modern down jackets echo this ancient solution. Air is still the hero. Materials just help organize it. You think about friction now. When layers rub gently against each other as you move, they generate small amounts of heat. Not enough to replace movement, but enough to contribute. Loose layers that shift rather than bind create warmth through motion. Even sound becomes part of the experience. A soft rustle replaces the sharp snap of wind. There is an observation from ethnographic studies that helps illuminate this. Groups living in cold environments often preferred multiple thin layers over single thick ones. This allowed flexibility and better heat management. Remove one layer while moving, add it back when still. Control mattered more than bulk. Tightness invites cold. It restricts circulation. It presses air out. Comfort here is about flow, blood flow, air flow that is slowed but not stopped. Movement flow that keeps warmth cycling. Some researchers point out that early humans may have intentionally avoided overly heavy garments because sweating in winter is dangerous. Sweat cools quickly, damp skin chills fast. Clothing that allowed ventilation while still blocking wind was ideal. Balance mattered. You feel the faint warmth building between layers, not against your skin but just beyond it. This buffer zone is where heat lingers longest. It is subtle but noticeable once you pay attention. A modern aside slips in gently. Think about stepping outside in layered clothing versus a single bulky coat. You feel more adaptable, less trapped. Prehistoric people needed that adaptability constantly. Weather shifted quickly. Activity levels changed hour by hour. You brush against someone as you walk, hides brushing hides. Even that contact reduces exposed surface area. Shared friction, shared warmth. Nothing is wasted. There is still uncertainty among scholars about how much plant material was used in clothing compared to animal products. Plant fibers break down quickly and leave little trace, but impressions in clay and wear patterns on tools suggest weaving, braiding, and matting long before formal textiles. Warmth does not require beauty, only effectiveness. You imagine grasses bundled together, dried carefully, layered between hides. They smell faintly sweet. Dryness matters again. Dry fibers insulate, wet ones steal heat. You kneel briefly to adjust your footing, and snow brushes your clothing. It does not melt immediately. That tells you the outer layer is doing its job. Heat is staying in, cold stays out. Children play nearby, rolling, crawling, tugging at each other. Their clothing shifts and resettles. They learn through play how layers move, how warmth feels, how to fix what slips. Learning happens through bodies, not instruction. There is a quiet ingenuity in all of this. No single invention, no dramatic breakthrough, just accumulation, trial, error, memory, passed hand to hand. You feel a sudden gust push against you, stronger than before. You turn sideways instinctively, letting the wind slide past rather than hit you full on. Your layers respond, flattening slightly, then springing back, air trapped, heat preserved. Some anthropologists suggest that this sensitivity to material and movement shaped how early humans thought about comfort. Comfort was not static, it was something you managed moment by moment. You feel that mindset settling in now. You think about modern heating again, how it aims to create uniform warmth everywhere at once. Here, warmth is uneven and alive. Your back feels different from your chest, your legs different from your arms, and that is acceptable, normal, even. You adjust a feather-filled pad under your arm and feel immediate relief. Small changes have big effects. Awareness matters. There is a faint smell of smoke caught in the fibers, not from a current fire, but from days ago. Smoke adds a bit of water resistance. It also signals home. Familiar scents calm the nervous system. Calm conserves energy. You realize that clothing here is not something you put on and forget. It is something you tend. Like a small fire. Adjust, check, dry, repair. Warmth requires attention. As the group slows again, preparing for another pause, you feel confident that the cold will not overwhelm you. Not because it is weak, but because you are layered against it in many small, thoughtful ways. You carry that understanding forward. Fur, feathers, fibers, friction. Non-dramatic alone, powerful together. Winter did not demand miracles. It rewarded patience, awareness, and materials used wisely. You walk on, wrapped in quiet technology, each step proof that warmth can be built softly, without noise, without flame, simply by knowing how the world behaves, and letting it work with you rather than against you. You notice how people treat fire now, with a kind of careful respect that feels very different from modern habits. No one rushes to light it at the first hint of cold. No one lets it roar without purpose. Fire is here, but it is not the center of everything. It is a tool, used briefly and thoughtfully, then allowed to fade. When flames appear, they are small, controlled, fed with dry twigs rather than thick logs. This is not because fuel is rare everywhere, but because excess heat is waste. Fire pulls attention, it demands tending, it eats time and energy that could be spent elsewhere. Archaeological hearths from prehistoric winter sites are often modest in size. Some a little more than shallow pits with traces of ash and charcoal. This suggests that fires burned hot and short. Rather than long and constant, people warmed hands, cooked food, dried clothing, then moved on. You feel the heat on your face as you crouch near the embers. It is intense up close, almost too much. Your back remains cold. This uneven warmth reminds you why fire alone is not enough. It heats surfaces, not systems. Once you step away, the warmth vanishes quickly. There is an interesting pattern noted by researchers studying early fire use. Fires were often positioned near shelter entrances rather than deep inside. This reduced smoke buildup and allowed heat to drift inward without filling the space. It also made it easier to abandon a fire quickly if conditions changed. You inhale and catch the familiar scent of smoke on your clothes again. Smoke is not just a byproduct. It preserves hides, deters insects, and dries damp materials. Fire serves many roles at once, making brief use more efficient than constant burning. Some anthropologists believe that early humans learned to associate fire with specific tasks rather than general comfort. Cooking, tool shaping, occasional warmth. Fire was summoned for a reason, not left burning out of habit. You watch someone feed the last twig into the coals, then deliberately spread the embers thinner. This helps them die out safely, while leaving residual warmth in the ground. Ash insulates, even after flames vanish. Heat lingers. There is still uncertainty about how common fire was in daily winter life. Some evidence suggests certain groups relied on it heavily. Others appear to have used it sparingly. Climate, fuel availability, and tradition all played roles. No single pattern fits everywhere. You think about the danger fire brings as well. Sparks can ignite shelters, smoke can choke, light can attract predators or rivals. In winter, mistakes are costly, caution becomes habit. A modern aside drifts in softly. Think about how often you turn on a heater without thinking, letting it run whether you need it or not. Here, nothing runs unattended. Every flame has a watcher, every spark matters. You warm your hands briefly, then pull back before they sweat. Sweaty hands in cold air lose heat fast. You rub them together instead, generating warmth through friction and movement. Fire assists, but does not replace bodily heat. Children are kept at a distance, watching but not crowding. They learn early that fire is useful, but not friendly. Respect keeps everyone safer and warmer in the long run. You notice that people time fire use carefully. Evening fires prepare for sleep. Morning fires ease stiffness. Midday fires are rare. Movement covers that need. Fire fills gaps rather than dominating the day. There is a subtle rhythm to it all. Fire appears, does its work, then retreats, like an animal that visits but does not stay. Some researchers suggest that this restrained relationship with fire influenced later architectural choices. Hearths became focal points only when fuel became abundant, and structures allowed safe containment. Before that, fire remained a guest, not a resident. You step back from the cooling embers and feel the contrast immediately. Cold air returns, but it feels less sharp now. Fire took the edge off. It did not erase winter. You realize that prehistoric people did not misunderstand fire. They understood it deeply, enough to know its limits, enough to avoid dependence. As the group moves on, the fire behind you fades into smoke and memory. Warmth stays with you anyway, carried by layers, movement, shared bodies, and careful choices. Fire helped, but it was never the whole answer. Winter survival depended on knowing when to invite flame and when to let it go. You walk forward with that lesson glowing quietly inside, banked under ash, ready when needed, but never burning out of control. You notice the land opening ahead, the trees thinning, the ground sloping toward a river that is half locked in ice. No one hesitates. The direction feels familiar, almost routine. This is not wandering, it is timing. Winter survival did not always mean enduring the cold head-on. Often, it meant knowing when to leave. Movement now takes on a different meaning, not the small, daily motion that keeps blood warm, but the larger seasonal drift that keeps danger at bay. You feel it in the way the group walks with confidence, not urgency. They have done this before, many times. Archaeological evidence shows clear seasonal patterns in prehistoric camps. Certain sites were used only in warmer months, others only in colder ones. Tools, food remains, and even the age of hunted animals tell the story. People did not stay put out of stubbornness. They followed warmth, food, and safety as the year turned. You imagine the decision being made weeks earlier, maybe months. Subtle signs add up. Longer nights, thicker frost, animals moving differently, rivers freezing earlier than expected. No single signal forces the move. Together, they whisper that it is time. This is where winter becomes something to sidestep rather than suffer. Moving a short distance south, lower, or into sheltered terrain could mean the difference between manageable cold and deadly exposure. Prehistoric people understood microclimates long before the word existed. Valleys trap cold, hills catch wind, forests block it. You feel the ground change beneath your feet as the group descends. Snow thins, ice cracks more often, revealing dark water beneath. The air smells different here, heavier, less sharp. This small shift matters. A few degrees warmer can transform winter from an enemy into a challenge. There is a detail that often surprises people. Migration was not always long or dramatic. Sometimes it was just a matter of moving a few miles, or even a few hundred meters, to a spot that held heat better. Winter camps might sit just out of reach of the worst wind, tucked behind ridges or near water that moderated temperature. Some researchers argue that this seasonal movement was the most important winter survival strategy of all. Others suggest it was only possible for certain groups with enough mobility and knowledge. The truth varies by region. In some landscapes, staying put made sense. In others, movement was essential. You watch as the group pauses near the riverbank. Fish traps sit beneath the ice, placed earlier in the season. Migration did not mean abandoning resources. It meant revisiting them at the right time. Winter camps were chosen for what they offered when everything else was scarce. A modern aside slips in gently. Think about how your heating bill spikes in winter. Now imagine solving that problem by simply living where winter is kinder. Prehistoric people did not have thermostats, but they had geography. Children walk easily, not burdened by excess. Everything carried matters. Migration trims possessions down to essentials. Heavy objects are left behind deliberately. Warmth here comes from flexibility, not accumulation. You notice how people talk quietly as they walk, sharing observations about the land, ice thickness, animal tracks, wind direction. Knowledge flows constantly. This is how mistakes are avoided. Winter punishes ignorance quickly. There is still debate about how far these seasonal movements went in different periods. Some populations traveled great distances annually. Others stayed within familiar territories year-round. Climate shifts forced adjustments. Ice ages expanded and contracted. People adapted again and again. You feel a subtle relief as the terrain grows more forgiving. Less wind, more cover. The cold does not vanish, but it loosens its grip. This is not luck, it is planning made visible. You realize now that prehistoric people did not always need heating because they avoided the coldest conditions whenever possible. Endurance was paired with foresight. Suffering was not a badge of honor. Survival was. The group slows as they approach a known winter camp. The ground is packed. The trees are bent in familiar ways. You sense memory in the place. Fires have burned here before. Bodies have slept here before. Warmth has lingered here before. You step into the space and feel it immediately. The air settles. The cold softens. Migration has done its work. You think about how different this feels from modern life, where movement is often restricted, and buildings are expected to solve everything. Here, the solution is motion itself, scaled up to the rhythm of the seasons. As the group begins to unpack, you understand that winter survival was not just about enduring what came. It was about choosing where to be when it arrived. You look back briefly at the land you crossed, now colder in memory than reality. Then you turn forward again, knowing that warmth, in this world, often meant knowing when to walk away from the worst of the cold, and when to settle into a place that could hold you through it. You feel the change as soon as everyone stops moving. Bodies draw closer without discussion, forming a loose ring that tightens as the air cools. No one reaches out dramatically. No one announces the need. It happens the way breathing happens, guided by instinct and memory rather than instruction. In winter, closeness is not intimacy, it is infrastructure. You sit shoulder to shoulder, knees brushing, backs nearly touching. Heat builds slowly, shared rather than owned. One body alone cools quickly. Many bodies together create a pocket of warmth that no single person could manage on their own. This is one of the oldest heating systems humans ever used, and it required no tools at all. Archaeological evidence from winter camps shows dense living arrangements, with sleeping areas clustered tightly rather than spread out. Space was not wasted. Every gap between bodies was a place where heat could escape. People learned to minimize those gaps without thinking about it consciously. You notice how the group arranges itself. Children in the center, elders near those who generate the most heat, strong adults on the outside, acting as buffers against drafts. This is not sentimental, it is practical. Heat flows outward. Those who can afford to lose a little warmth do so. There is a quiet efficiency to it. No one complains about personal space. The concept barely exists here. Winter compresses social boundaries. Privacy becomes a luxury reserved for warmer months. You think about how strange this might feel to someone used to sleeping alone under thick blankets. Here, blankets are bodies. The rise and fall of breathing becomes a shared rhythm. It calms you without effort. A small but telling detail emerges when you listen closely. People synchronize rest. No one stays awake alone for long. Wakefulness without movement leads to cold. Rotating sleep ensures someone is always shifting, adjusting, maintaining warmth for the group. Some anthropologists suggest that this constant physical proximity strengthens social bonds in ways modern life rarely replicates. Others caution against romanticizing it, pointing out that closeness also spread illness. Both can be true. Winter forced trade-offs, and warmth often won. You feel someone adjust beside you, pulling a hide higher, tucking it around two bodies instead of one. Sharing reduces surface area exposed to air. This is geometry, not generosity. Children learn this early. They are drawn into the center without question. Their smaller bodies lose heat faster. Protecting them protects the future of the group. Warmth becomes a shared responsibility. There is an unspoken rule here. No one pulls away unnecessarily. To do so would disrupt the balance. Cooperation is not enforced, it is assumed. You notice how voices drop as people settle. Quiet conserves energy. Loud talking wastes breath and warmth. Even laughter softens into murmurs. The night wraps around the group, but does not penetrate it. A modern aside drifts in gently. Think about how cold public spaces feel when everyone spreads out. Now imagine the same room filled wall to wall. Temperature changes without a single heater turning on. Bodies matter. You feel your back warming where it touches someone else. Heat transfers slowly, steadily. It does not shock or overwhelm. It simply accumulates. Some researchers point out that communal sleeping may have reduced the need for constant fire use at night. Fire demands vigilance. Bodies do not. Once arranged, the system maintains itself. You shift slightly, finding a position that balances comfort and efficiency. Too much movement would disturb others. Too little would let cold creep in. There is a sweet spot, and you find it. Smell becomes part of the experience. Smoke, hide, sweat, earth. Not pleasant by modern standards, but familiar. Familiarity lowers stress. Lower stress conserves energy. You notice how breathing slows. Heart rate drops. Warmth supports rest, and rest supports warmth. The cycle reinforces itself. There is still discussion among scholars about how much of this clustering was driven by cold versus protection from predators. Likely both. In winter, warmth and safety often align. If it deepen, the outside world growing quieter. Inside the cluster, life continues in small movements and shared breath. The cold remains, but it is kept at bay by cooperation rather than conquest. As sleep pulls you under, you understand something fundamental. Prehistoric people did not face winter alone. They faced it together. Bodies pressed close, warmth circulating quietly from one to the next. And in that closeness, heating became unnecessary. Not because winter was gentle, but because humans learned that survival, like warmth, multiplied when shared. Sleep comes differently here. You do not collapse into it. You arrange yourself carefully, curling inward, tucking limbs close, shaping your body into something compact and efficient. This posture is not taught. It is discovered, night after cold night, until it becomes instinct. You draw your knees toward your chest and feel immediate relief. Less surface area exposed, less heat slipping away. Your spine rounds gently, protecting your core. Even your chin lowers toward your chest, guarding the throat where heat escapes easily. Your body becomes its own shelter. Archaeological interpretations of prehistoric sleeping areas suggest this kind of curled rest was common. The distribution of wear on bedding materials and the size of sleeping spaces point to compact positions rather than sprawled ones. People slept small because small stayed warm. You notice how bedding is layered beneath and around you. Hides on the ground, more hides over the body, sometimes plant material in between. This is not about softness, it is about creating a pocket of still air that moves with you as you breathe. There is a lesser discussed detail that adds to this picture. Some groups likely used simple raised edges around sleeping areas, built from packed earth or stones. These low borders helped keep bedding in place and blocked drafts at ground level. A small barrier makes a big difference at night. You feel someone nearby adjust their position, and the shared warmth shifts. Bodies are not static heaters. They are dynamic, responding to pressure, movement, and breath. The system adapts constantly, even in sleep. Your breathing deepens. With each exhale, warm air fills the small space around your face before drifting away. Some warmth is recaptured. Not much, but enough to matter over hours. A modern aside slips in quietly. Think about how much warmer you feel when you curl up under a blanket compared to lying flat. Prehistoric people used posture the way you use bedding. Position was insulation. You notice how people settle with heads closer together and feet angled outward. This reduces heat loss from extremities while keeping air circulation balanced. Feet cool faster, Placing them toward the outer edge makes sense. Children are often nestled between adults, their smaller forms protected from drafts. They sleep deeper, breathing softly, unaware of the careful geometry around them. There is still conversation among researchers about how much prehistoric sleep patterns differed from modern ones. Some suggest shorter, lighter sleep, with more frequent waking. Others argue for long, deep rests during winter when daylight was scarce. Both patterns could exist, shifting with conditions. You wake briefly, not startled, just aware. This happens naturally when sleeping in cold environments. The body checks in. Am I warm enough? Do I need to adjust? You pull a hide closer, feel warmth return, and drift off again. Fire is absent now. No glow, no crackle, just the quiet sounds of breath and distant wind. The lack of flame feels normal, not threatening. Warmth has been arranged already. You sense how the ground beneath you remains steady, insulated by layers and bodies. Cold does not creep up the way it would on bare earth. Preparation did its work earlier. Some anthropologists note that these sleeping strategies reduce the need for nighttime activity. Less waking meant less movement, conserving energy. Energy saved is warmth preserved. You feel the edges of sleep blur into dreaming. Images drift. The body remains curled, protective, efficient. Even in unconsciousness, it cooperates with winter. You think briefly about how modern sleep positions are chosen for comfort or habit, rarely for survival. Here, comfort and survival are the same thing. You sleep the way that keeps you alive. The night stretches on, but it does not feel endless. Each small adjustment keeps the balance. Warm enough, safe enough. As dawn approaches, your body will uncurl slowly, stiff at first, then warm as movement returns. Sleep ends the way it began, carefully. For now, you remain tucked in, breathing quietly, held by layers, bodies, and posture. Heating is unnecessary, because nothing has been left to chance. Winter passes the night outside, while inside, in this compact human nest, warmth circulates softly, almost unnoticed, and you sleep, not despite the cold, but alongside it. Morning arrives without ceremony. There is no alarm, no sudden shift from warm to cold. You wake gradually, aware of stiffness before discomfort. Your body feels dense, grounded, used. This is how childhood shapes winter survival, not through lessons spoken aloud, but through sensations repeated until they feel normal. You stretch slowly, careful not to expose too much skin at once. Someone nearby is already awake, moving quietly, adding motion to the shared space. Heat stirs again. You are reminded that this toughness was not something prehistoric people switched on in adulthood. It began early. Children here do not experience cold as a shock. They grow into it. From their first winters, they are carried outside, wrapped but not sealed away. Their bodies learn to respond. Blood vessels adapt. Shivering becomes efficient rather than frantic. Cold registers as information, not threat. Anthropological studies of modern cold-adapted populations offer insight into this process. Children raised in cold environments often show better circulation to hands and feet, and a higher tolerance for low temperatures. These traits are shaped by exposure over time, not heroic endurance. You imagine a young child waking beside you, rubbing sleep from their eyes, breath puffing faintly in the air. They do not complain. Cold is simply part of the morning. Complaints come later, when hunger or boredom sets in. There is a small but telling observation from ethnographers. In many traditional societies, children are not rushed indoors at the first sign of cold. They are allowed to play, to explore, to fall, and get back up. Through this, they learn how their bodies feel, at different temperatures, and how to respond. You watch as a child pulls a hide closer around their shoulders without prompting. No one taught them this explicitly. They learned by watching, by feeling, by adjusting. This is education without instruction. Some researchers suggest that modern sensitivity to cold is partly a result of sheltered childhoods. Heated rooms, thick insulation, minimal exposure. The body never practices. Here, practice is constant. You feel your own fingers warming faster than they did on your first morning. Adaptation happens quickly when conditions demand it. The body responds to repetition. There is still discussion among scientists about how much early cold exposure permanently alters adult tolerance. Some argue the effects fade. Others believe early conditioning leaves lasting changes. The truth likely depends on consistency and duration. Prehistoric life offered both. You notice that children are given tasks appropriate to their size. Gathering small sticks, carrying light bundles, helping with food preparation. Movement keeps them warm and builds strength. Idleness is rare. Laughter breaks out as one child slips on frost and recovers quickly. No panic. No scolding. Cold teaches resilience gently when fear is absent. A modern aside drifts in softly. Think about how fragile you might feel stepping into cold water unexpectedly. Now imagine doing that daily from a young age. Shock fades. Familiarity grows. You realize that winter survival was not about making adults tougher after the fact. It was about raising people who never expected constant warmth in the first place. Expectation shapes experience. As the morning progresses, the group spreads out, activity resuming. Children move easily among adults, not underfoot but integrated. They learn routes, wind patterns, safe spots by moving through them. There is a quiet pride in how the youngest members handle the cold. Not pride in suffering, but handle the cold. Not pride in suffering, but in competence. They belong here. Their bodies agree. You feel a sense of continuity settle in. The skills you rely on now were once learned the same way. Slowly, repeatedly, without drama. As the sun climbs higher, the chill eases slightly. Layers are adjusted. Movement increases. Another day unfolds, carried by bodies that were shaped for this climate from their earliest years. You stand and join the flow, aware that winter did not defeat these people because it never surprised them. Cold was not an intruder. It was the environment they grew into, one careful morning at a time. As the light shifts toward afternoon, you notice how attention turns toward food again, not in a rushed way, but with quiet anticipation. Eating here is timed, not random. When you eat, matters almost as much as what you eat, especially in winter. You feel hunger rise gently, not sharply. That is deliberate. Food is space to support warmth when it is needed most. The largest meals tend to come later in the day. As cold deepens and movement slows, digestion becomes an ally, releasing heat steadily through the longest, coldest hours. This pattern shows up repeatedly in studies of traditional winter living. Groups in cold climates often favor substantial evening meals. It is not indulgence, it is strategy. Processing food raises metabolic heat, helping the body stay warm during rest. You sit as food is shared, the smell rich and grounding. Fat, protein, dense calories. This is not a time for light snacks. The body needs fuel that burns slow. You chew slowly, feeling warmth spread outward from your core as digestion begins its quiet work. There is a detail that often goes unnoticed. Eating together synchronizes warmth across the group. Everyone begins digesting at roughly the same time. Heat production rises collectively. No one is left cooling alone. You think about how modern advice often warns against eating late. Here, the logic is reversed. Sleeping on an empty stomach would invite cold to settle deep. Full bellies support long, stable rest. Some researchers point out that this timing also reduced the need for night fires. Internal heat replaced external flame. Fuel was conserved. Risk was lowered. You notice how children are encouraged to eat well before sleep, even if they protest slightly. Elders insist gently. Experiences taught them what hunger does to warmth. No one argues long. There is still discussion among scholars about how strictly these eating schedules were followed. Likely they shifted with availability and circumstance, but the pattern appears often enough to suggest intention rather than accident. You finish eating and feel heavy in a comforting way. Not sluggish, but settled. Your body shifts focus from movement to processing. Heat builds quietly. You wrap your layers more snugly, trapping that warmth close. A modern aside drifts in softly. Think about how cozy you feel after a hot meal on a cold night. Multiply that effect by necessity rather than comfort, and you begin to understand how powerful food timing can be. As evening approaches, activity slows. Tasks are completed. Tools are set aside. The day narrows toward rest. The cold returns gently, but it meets a body already prepared. You feel sleepiness arrive sooner than usual. Digestion encourages it. Rest allows heat to be used efficiently, rather than burn through motion. The cycle is complete. You settle back into the group, stomach warm, body relaxed. Winter waits outside, but inside, warmth is already rising, fueled by careful choices made hours earlier. Heating was not needed because warmth had been planned for in advance, eaten slowly, and carried inward, and as night approaches again, you understand how deeply survival was woven into daily rhythm, down to the timing of a shared meal. As darkness settles again, you sense a different kind of warmth spreading, one that has nothing to do with bodies or food. The group slows, voices lower, and familiar actions repeat in a pattern that feels almost ceremonial. Winter is not faced with silence alone. It is softened by habit, story, and belief. Someone begins a quiet ritual, simple and unadorned. A stone is placed near the sleeping area. A gesture is repeated the same way it has been for years. No one explains it. No one questions it. These acts do not change the temperature, but they change how the cold is felt. Across prehistoric cultures, there is evidence of winter rituals tied to protection, luck, and continuity. Carved objects, repeated symbols, carefully placed items in shelters all suggest that people used belief as another layer of insulation. When the world feels hostile, meaning becomes warmth. You feel your breathing slow as the familiar rhythm unfolds. Predictability calms the nervous system. Calm reduces wasted energy. Even without understanding the symbols, your body responds. Fear loosens its grip. There is a small but fascinating observation from archaeology. Some winter camps contain objects that seem to serve no practical function. Stones carried long distances, shells far from the sea, items placed carefully and repeatedly in the same spot. These choices suggest emotional needs were tended alongside physical ones. You imagine stories being told softly, not loudly, not dramatically. Tales of past winters survived, of animals outwitted, of ancestors who endured colder nights than this one. Stories remind everyone that winter ends, that it always has. Children listen, half asleep, absorbing reassurance rather than facts. Stories warm differently than fires. They do not burn out. They linger. Some researchers believe that ritual helped regulate behavior during stressful seasons. Shared belief reduced conflict. Reduced conflict conserved energy. Harmony kept groups alive. Winter was not the time for division. You notice how humor appears even here. A gentle tease, a familiar joke. Laughter releases tension. Tension burns calories. Even joy has a survival role. A modern aside slips in quietly. Think about how comforting familiar routines feel during difficult times. The ritual of making tea, turning on a lamp at dusk. Here, rituals serve the same purpose without electricity or glass. You feel your shoulders relax as the last gestures are completed. The shelter feels safer, though nothing physical has changed. Perception matters. The body responds to what the mind believes. There is still disagreement among scholars about how much these rituals were consciously linked to survival versus spiritual worldview. The separation may be artificial. For prehistoric people, belief and survival were woven together. You settle back into place, comforted not just by warmth, but by continuity. Others have done this before you. Others will do it after. Winter becomes part of a larger story, rather than an isolated threat. As sleep approaches, the rituals fade into background memory, leaving behind a sense of order. Cold remains outside, but it feels less personal now. You close your eyes, carried not just by hides and bodies, but by shared meaning. Heating was unnecessary, because people learned to warm themselves from the inside out, with habit, belief, and the quiet power of knowing they were not alone in the dark. By now, winter no longer feels like a visitor. It feels like the default setting of the world. You wake into cold the same way you wake into darkness before dawn. It simply is. There is no shock in it anymore. No sense that something has gone wrong. You step outside and feel the air against your face. Sharp, yes, but expected. Your body responds without drama. Breath slows, muscles engage. You do not brace yourself. You accept the temperature the way you accept gravity. This acceptance matters more than it first appears. Prehistoric people did not treat winter as an emergency that interrupted normal life. For much of human history, cold seasons were the longest part of the year. They shaped schedules, diets, movement, and thought. Winter was not the exception. It was the baseline. Archaeological layers from long-occupied sites show continuous winter activity. Tools repaired, food processed, children growing. Life did not pause until warmth returned. It adjusted. You notice how no one speaks of enduring winter, only of living through it. Language shapes experience. When cold is framed as temporary suffering, it drains morale. When it is framed as normal, it loses power. There is a psychological shift that comes with this mindset. Fear recedes. Attention sharpens. You stop wishing for conditions to change and start responding to what is actually present. Energy stops leaking into frustration. Some anthropologists suggest that this mental adaptation was as important as any physical one. Groups that accepted winter as normal were more likely to plan effectively, avoid panic, and survive unexpected cold snaps. Calm thinking saved lives. You feel this calm settle into your own imagined body. Cold no longer feels personal. It is not attacking you. It is simply there, like the night sky or the ground beneath your feet. A modern aside slips in softly. Think about how much distress comes from being cold when you believe you should be warm. Now imagine removing that expectation. The sensation changes. That expectation. The sensation changes. You watch others move with ease. No hurried gestures, no constant checking for warmth. Layers are adjusted when needed, then forgotten. Attention turns outward, to tracks in the snow, to cloud cover, to the sound of ice shifting. Children play nearby, their laughter cutting briefly through the quiet. They fall, get up, keep going. Cold does not stop them, because it never promised not to be there. There is still discussion among researchers about how much this acceptance was cultural versus biological. Did people think differently about discomfort, or did their bodies simply register it differently? The answer may be both. Experience reshapes perception. You realize that much of modern suffering in cold comes from contrast. Heated rooms followed by icy streets. Thin clothing chosen for style rather than function. Expectations built on artificial comfort. Here, there is no contrast, just continuity. As the day unfolds, you notice how tasks are chosen to fit the conditions rather than fight them. No one attempts delicate work when fingers are numb. Those tasks wait for warmer moments or are adapted. Flexibility prevents frustration. You feel a strange sense of peace in this. Winter becomes predictable once you stop resisting it. Predictability breeds confidence. There is no heroism here. No boasting about enduring cold. That would be unnecessary. Endurance is assumed. You breathe in deeply, cold air filling your lungs, and feel steady rather than strained. Your body knows what to do. It has been practicing for generations. Heating was unnecessary because winter was never treated as a crisis. It was treated as home. As you move forward into the day, the cold stays with you, but it no longer demands attention. It fades into the background, another constant among many. And in that quiet acceptance, you understand something essential. Prehistoric people did not conquer winter. They normalized it, and in doing so, they removed much of its power. As you move through the day, you begin to notice differences in bodies. Subtle but meaningful. Some people seem built a little wider through the torso. Others carry more hair on arms and legs. None of it is dramatic. Nothing that would stand out in a crowd. But here, in winter, these small traits add up. You glance down at your own skin and imagine it thicker, less reactive to cold air. Skin is not just a barrier. It regulates heat, sweat, and blood flow. Over many generations, bodies that manage this balance more efficiently were more likely to survive and pass on their traits. Anthropologists studying skeletal remains have noticed patterns tied to climate. Populations in colder regions often had shorter limbs relative to their bodies. Shorter limbs lose heat more slowly. A compact shape conserves warmth. This is not conscious design. It is gradual adaptation shaped by survival. Hair plays a role too, though not in the exaggerated way popular imagination suggests. Humans did not suddenly become fur-covered, but variation in hair density and texture mattered. Even a small increase in body hair can trap air close to the skin, especially when combined with clothing. You think about how hair on the head is treated with care, covered, protected. Heat loss through the scalp is significant. Prehistoric people learned this quickly, even without knowing the biology behind it. There is an interesting point often raised in discussions of human evolution. Cold tolerance is not just about insulation. It is about circulation. The ability to redirect blood flow efficiently keeps core organs warm while allowing extremities to function long enough to work. You feel that balance now as your fingers remain usable even in cold air. Some researchers believe that repeated cold exposure may have influenced how quickly blood vessels constrict and relax. Faster responses reduce heat loss without cutting off function. These changes may not be visible in bones, but they are felt in living bodies. You notice that people here rarely fidget when cold. Fidgeting wastes energy. Their movements are purposeful. Economy of motion is part of physical adaptation, as much as muscle or fat. A modern aside slips in quietly. Think about how sensitive your skin might be to cold after months indoors. Now imagine a lifetime of gradual exposure. Sensation changes. Thresholds shift. There is still lively discussion about how much of human cold tolerance is inherited versus learned. Genetics set possibilities. Experience shapes how those possibilities are used. Prehistoric life offered consistent training from birth to old age. You see elders moving more slowly but still participating. Their bodies may produce less heat, but experience compensates. They choose positions carefully. They move at the right times. Adaptation continues throughout life. You realize that evolution does not need extremes. It works through small advantages repeated over thousands of winters. A slightly better response to cold. A slightly more efficient metabolism. Over time, these differences matter. As the group pauses again, you feel how your own imagined body fits the environment. Not perfectly, but well enough. That was always the goal. Not comfort, but adequacy. Heating was unnecessary not because humans were immune to cold, but because their bodies gradually aligned with the climates they inhabited. Skin, hair, circulation, and shape all played their part. You move on with this awareness, carrying the sense that winter shaped humanity, quietly, patiently, and permanently, and that even now, beneath modern layers and habits, those ancient adjustments still linger, waiting to be remembered. You feel the weight of a tool in your hand, familiar and reassuring. It is not warm in itself. Stone rarely is. But the moment you use it, warmth follows. Tools now take center stage, not as sources of heat, but as clever shortcuts that reduced how much warmth you needed in the first place. You crouch and begin working, scraping, cutting, shaping. Each movement is efficient, practiced. The tool does the hard part so your body does not have to overexert itself. Less wasted effort means less wasted heat. This is an often overlooked part of winter survival. Staying warm was not only about generating heat, but about avoiding unnecessary loss. Archaeological evidence shows a clear increase in tool specialization in colder periods. Scrapers designed specifically for hide processing, blades shaped for efficient butchering, awls and points for piercing tough material without excessive force. These tools reduced exposure time. Faster work meant less time standing still in the cold. You notice how tasks are planned around tools. A well-sharpened edge allows you to finish before fingers stiffen. A dull one forces pauses, reheating hands, restarting work. Tool care becomes warmth care. Edges are checked constantly. Repairs happen before tools fail, not after. There is a detail that often goes unnoticed. Many prehistoric tools show signs of being designed for use with gloves or wrapped hands. Thick handles, grooves for grip, textured surfaces. These choices mattered in winter, when bare skin against stone could sap heat quickly. You imagine wrapping a strip of hide around a tool handle. Instantly, the cold bite of stone softens. Grip improves. Control increases. A small modification makes long work possible without numbing pain. Some researchers suggest that the development of compound tools, stone blades set into wooden or bone handles, was partly driven by cold climate needs. Handles insulated the hand. They also allowed more force with less strain. Less strain meant less sweating. Less sweating meant less chill later. You feel that logic in your body now. Work flows smoothly. You do not rush, but you do not linger. Tools extend your reach and shorten your exposure. A modern aside slips in quietly. Think about using the right tool for a job versus struggling with the wrong one. Efficiency feels good. In winter, it also feels warm. You watch others working nearby. Tasks are divided based on skill rather than strength alone. Someone with steady hands does fine detail work in brief bursts. Someone stronger handles tasks that involve constant movement. This division keeps everyone warm in different ways. There is still discussion among archaeologists about how much tool innovation was driven by climate versus social factors. Some argue cold forced creativity. Others believe social learning accelerated innovation once it began. As with so much in prehistory, the answer is layered. You notice how tools also shape posture, squatting rather than bending, bracing elbows against knees. These positions reduce strain and conserve energy. Good posture is not about appearance, it is about endurance. You pause to rest your hands, rubbing them together briefly, then returning to work. No one stops completely unless necessary. Tools allow for these micro pauses without losing progress. There is an understated brilliance here. Tools do not create warmth, but they protect it. By reducing effort, they reduce heat loss. By speeding tasks, they shorten exposure. By improving precision, they prevent mistakes that would cost energy to fix. You think about how modern life often separates Here, tools complement the body. They amplify, rather than replace human movement. Children watch closely. They are given small tools early, not because they are useful workers, but because learning tool use early shapes movement and confidence. Confidence reduces hesitation. Hesitation in cold costs warmth. You remember how earlier sections focused on bodies, food, shelter, and movement. Tools tie all of those together. They help make clothing. They shape shelters. They prepare food. They enable movement across difficult terrain. There is a quiet respect for tools here. Not reverence, but care. Tools are cleaned, stored properly, carried close to the body to keep them from icing over. A frozen tool is harder to use and more dangerous. Some anthropologists have noted that tool loss in winter camps appears to have been taken very seriously. Lost tools meant lost efficiency. Lost efficiency meant lost warmth. This may explain why winter sites often show careful tool caching and repair areas. You feel the cold stone against your palm again as you set the tool down briefly. Even that contact is managed. You place it on hide rather than snow. Small habits matter. As the task finishes, you feel satisfied, not exhausted. That balance is the goal. Winter does not reward overexertion. It rewards consistency. You stand, stretch lightly, and feel warmth surge back into worked muscles. The tool did its job. Your body did not have to pay extra. Heating was unnecessary because so many other systems reduced the need for it. Tools were part of that system. They made life efficient enough that warmth could be maintained without constant fire. You move on. Tools secured. Hands warm enough. Understanding that survival was not about brute force or suffering. It was about smart design applied to daily life. And as you walk, you carry this quiet realization with you. Prehistoric people did not just endure winter. They engineered around it, one careful tool at a time. You begin to notice how often people pause, not to rest, but to look. Heads tilt slightly, eyes narrow against the pale light. Winter survival depends as much on reading the world as on resisting it. Wind, cloud, slope, and shadow all speak, if you know how to listen. You feel the breeze shift against your cheek, and immediately adjust your stance. Turning a few degrees changes everything. The wind slides past instead of cutting straight through layers. This knowledge is embodied, not intellectual. People learn it by living outside, not by studying maps. Archaeological evidence from winter camps shows careful placement in relation to prevailing winds. Shelters are rarely found on exposed ridges. They cluster behind rises, within tree lines, near rock faces that break gusts. These choices repeat too consistently to be accidental. People understood wind as an invisible force that could steal heat faster than cold alone. You watch someone test the air with damp fingers, then nod and shift direction slightly. A small change now prevents hours of chill later. Wind chill compounds cold, stripping warmth from skin and clothing far more aggressively than still air. Blocking it matters more than raising temperature. You notice how people avoid valleys at night. Cold air sinks. It pools low, thick and heavy. What looks sheltered can become a trap after sunset. Instead, camps sit just high enough to escape the coldest air without catching the strongest wind. Balance again. There is a subtle sound you learn to recognize. Snow squeaking underfoot means deep cold. Softer crunch suggests slightly warmer air. Ice cracking sharply signals dangerous temperature swings. These sounds are not background noise, they are information. You think about how modern life dulls this awareness. Double-pane windows, insulated walls, climate control. Weather becomes something you check on a screen rather than feel on your skin. Here, skin is the instrument. Some researchers suggest that this constant environmental reading was a form of intelligence, shaped by necessity. Those who noticed small changes survived. Those who did not paid for it quickly. Winter does not forgive inattention. You feel your eyes drawn to cloud cover. Thick clouds at night trap heat. Clear skies let it escape into space. A cloudy night means slightly warmer sleep. A clear one demands better preparation. People notice this without naming it. A modern aside slips in quietly. Think about how frost forms more heavily under clear skies. That knowledge once guided decisions about when to travel, when to shelter, when to cluster tighter. You notice how routes are chosen carefully. Paths follow tree lines that block wind. Open crossings happen quickly, with purpose. Lingering in exposed areas is avoided. Movement is planned to minimize time spent where warmth bleeds away fastest. Children learn this early. Though no one lectures them, they are guided gently away from windy spots, corrected with a hand on the shoulder. Over time, they feel the difference themselves. There is still debate among scholars about how formal this knowledge was. Did people name wind directions and cold patterns, or did they simply feel them? Language may have existed for some aspects. Others lived entirely in the body. You feel the ground again with your feet. Hard-packed snow reflects cold upward. Softer snow insulates. Ice chills fast. Dirt holds heat better. Each surface changes how long you can stand still without discomfort. You watch someone choose a resting spot not by comfort but by temperature. A shadowed rock face blocks wind. A sunlit patch, even weak winter sun, adds a little warmth. These choices stack up. You realize now that heating was unnecessary partly because people avoided the worst conditions whenever possible. They did not stand in wind waiting to be warmed. They stepped out of it. There is a quiet efficiency in this approach. No energy spent fighting the elements head-on. Instead, energy is spent positioning the body where conditions are already favorable. You think about how modern heating often compensates for poor placement. Buildings placed without regard for wind or sun rely on machines to correct the mistake. Prehistoric people had no such fallback. Placement had to be right. As the group pauses again, you feel sheltered, though no walls surround you. A slope blocks the wind. Trees break its force. The air here feels thicker, calmer. Temperature has not changed, but your experience has. Some anthropologists note that this kind of environmental awareness likely shaped cognitive development. Reading subtle cues, anticipating change. Winter sharpened perception. You notice the way people scan the horizon as clouds gather. Snow may come. Snow insulates but also hides hazards. Decisions shift accordingly. Nothing is static. You breathe in and feel the cold air fill your lungs without distress. You are not bracing anymore. You are adapting moment by moment. Heating was unnecessary because warmth was not produced in isolation. It was managed through awareness, positioning, and timing. Winter was navigated, not resisted. As you move on with the group, you carry this quiet skill with you. The knowledge that sometimes the warmest choice is simply standing in the right place at the right time. And in a world without thermostats or forecasts, that knowledge made all the difference. There comes a moment when the cold stops being theoretical. You feel it bite deeper than before, sharper, more insistent. This is where the limits appear, the edge of what adaptation can handle. Prehistoric people survived winter without heating. But that does not mean winter was harmless. It could still kill, and everyone knew it. You notice the mood shift slightly when conditions worsen. Conversation tightens. Movements become more deliberate. There is no panic, but there is focus. Winter demands respect, especially when storms arrive unexpectedly, or when the body is already tired. Evidence from prehistoric burial sites reminds us of this reality. Some remains show signs consistent with cold exposure, malnutrition, or seasonal stress. Survival was common enough to continue the species. But loss was part of the story too. Not everyone made it through every winter. You feel the cold pressing harder against your face now, stinging exposed skin. Wind has picked up, carrying fine ice that finds gaps in clothing. This is the danger point. When conditions stack up, cold becomes more than discomfort. it becomes risk. People respond quickly. Layers are adjusted. Faces turn away from wind. The group closes ranks. These reactions are automatic, practiced. But even with experience, there are limits. You think about the body's warning signs. Shivering that becomes violent. Fingers that lose sensation entirely. Confusion creeping in. Prehistoric people did not have medical terms for hypothermia, but they recognized the signs. Someone slowing too much. Someone making poor decisions. Someone laughing when they should not. When those signs appeared, action followed. Extra food, extra layers, closer clustering. Care was practical, sometimes urgent. There is a sobering observation from anthropology. In harsh winters, groups sometimes had to make difficult decisions about who could be supported and who could not. Elders, or the severely ill, were at higher risk. Community helped, but resources were finite. Survival was not always kind. You feel the weight of that knowledge settle. Adaptation does not mean invincibility. It means pushing the boundary of what is survivable, not erasing it. Some researchers argue that these limits shaped social structure deeply. Cooperation became essential because no individual could always save themselves. Others point out that cooperation itself had limits under extreme stress. Winter tested bonds as much as bodies. You notice how carefully people manage energy now. No unnecessary movement. No wasted effort. Everything is directed toward getting through the worst of it. A modern aside slips in quietly. Think about how dangerous cold can be even today when heaters fail or power goes out. Technology hides risk until it suddenly vanishes. Prehistoric people lived with that risk visible at all times. You feel fatigue creep in, the kind that makes cold harder to fight. This is another danger. Exhaustion reduces heat production. Winter punishes those who overextend. This is why planning mattered so much. Why food was stored. Why migration happened early. Why shelter placement mattered. These strategies were buffers against moments like this. There is still discussion among scholars about how often prehistoric people faced truly lethal cold events. Climate varied. Some winters were manageable. Others were brutal. Ice ages brought instability, not uniform cold. Unpredictability was the real threat. You watch the group reach a safer area, partially shielded from wind. The tension eases slightly. Not relief, but control. Control returns warmth to the body as surely as food or fire. Someone stumbles briefly, then recovers. Others notice immediately. No one ignores it. Attention saves lives. You think about how modern narratives often portray prehistoric people as endlessly resilient, almost superhuman. This moment corrects that. They were human, they suffered, they adapted, but they also lost. Heating was unnecessary because enough people survived often enough to pass on knowledge, not because winter was gentle. As the storm presses on, you huddle closer, feeling bodies around you tense but steady. Survival now depends on everything learned so far. Clothing, positioning, cooperation, calm. You realize that the real miracle is not that people survived winter without heating, but that they survived it at all, given the risks. When the wind finally eases, and the cold loosens its grip, the relief is physical and emotional. Muscles unclench, breath deepens. You have crossed another threshold. You understand now that winter survival was not a constant state of comfort. It was a negotiation with danger, repeated every year. Heating was one solution that came much later. Before that, people relied on awareness, restraint, and each other. As you move forward again, the lesson stays with you. Prehistoric people did not ignore the limits of endurance. They lived right up against them, learning where the line was and how not to cross it. And that knowledge, hard-won, and sometimes costly, is part of why you are here now, walking onward, still warm enough to continue. When the weather calms and life resumes its quieter rhythm, you begin to notice traces of the past beneath your feet. Not memories, but evidence. Small things that do not fit the old idea of prehistoric life as constant misery. The ground itself seems to whisper corrections. You kneel and brush aside a thin layer of snow, revealing fragments left behind. Burned bone, worked stone, carefully placed debris. These are not signs of desperation. They are signs of planning. Archaeology has a way of unsettling comfortable assumptions, and winter survival is no exception. For a long time, people assumed prehistoric winters must have been unbearable. The logic seemed obvious. No heating, no insulation as we know it, no modern medicine, but the physical record tells a more complicated story. Many winter sites show continuity, reuse, and even comfort-oriented choices. You imagine an archaeologist thousands of years later standing where you stand now, puzzling over why people return to the same cold places year after year. Why not move somewhere warmer permanently? Why not abandon these regions entirely? The answer seems simple once you live it. These places worked. Some winter camps show signs of long-term occupation, hearths repaired rather than abandoned, bedding areas rebuilt in the same spots, tool caches stored carefully for return. These are not emergency shelters, they are seasonal homes. You feel a sense of continuity in that. Winter did not drive people away from their land. It shaped how they used it. There is a surprising pattern seen in some excavated sites. Food remains are often more varied in winter layers than expected. This suggests people were not always starving through cold months. They had strategies: fishing under ice, trapping, stored food, opportunistic hunting. Winter was lean, but not always empty. You think about how modern imagination often exaggerates prehistoric suffering. Cold equals constant hunger, darkness equals despair. But people adapt emotionally as well as physically. Normal life continues when it must. Some researchers point to wear patterns on tools as evidence of winter routines. Scrapers used heavily during cold months. Repair tools showing frequent use. These patterns suggest people spent time maintaining and improving their gear, while weather limited travel. Winter became a season of preparation as much as endurance. You notice how this changes the story. Instead of imagining winter as wasted time, you begin to see it as a different mode of living. Slower, more inward, focused on repair, teaching, and planning. Children learning skills indoors or in sheltered areas. Elders passing on knowledge. Tools refined. Stories repeated. Winter creates space for transmission of culture. There is still debate among archaeologists about how comfortable these winter lives really were. Some argue that evidence of planning does not equal ease. Others point out that repeated occupation implies tolerability. People do not return to places that reliably kill them. You feel the truth of that now. Survival does not require pleasure, but it does require a baseline of safety. The evidence suggests prehistoric people found that baseline, often enough to make winter life viable. You uncover a small concentration of stones arranged deliberately. Not a wall, not a fire pit, something else. Perhaps a windbreak anchor, perhaps a sleeping boundary. Archaeologists often argue over such features. Interpretation is tricky, but intention is clear. Someone placed these stones, on purpose. This is one of the great lessons archaeology teaches. Prehistoric people were not passive victims of environment. They were active problem solvers. Winter did not simply happen to them, they responded to it with creativity. You think about how fragile modern life can be when systems fail. Heating goes out and panic follows. Here, there is no single point of failure. Warmth is distributed across many small systems. If one fails, others compensate. Some researchers have noted that this redundancy may explain why early humans survived such volatile climates. No single strategy carried all the risk. Movement, clothing, shelter, food, social cooperation, belief, all overlapped. You brush snow back into place, covering the traces again. The ground returns to silence, but the message remains. Prehistoric people did not need heating, because they built lives that did not depend on it. This challenges a deeper assumption about progress. We often equate comfort with advancement, but comfort can also create vulnerability. The archaeological record suggests resilience came from flexibility rather than control. You feel a quiet respect for the unknown hands that shaped this place. They were not thinking about future excavations. They were thinking about tonight, about staying warm enough, about making it through another winter. As you stand and move on, you carry this revised image with you. Not frozen figures huddled in misery, but capable people adjusting their world in small, effective ways. Winter did not erase culture. It shaped it, and the ground remembers. As you move deeper into this understanding, you begin to hear other voices, not around the fire or in the shelter, but across time. These are the voices of people who study the past and still do not fully agree on how winter life truly felt. The story is not settled. It never is. You imagine a quiet room centuries later, maps spread across tables, bones laid out carefully, notes written in the margins. Some researchers argue that prehistoric winters were harsher than we want to believe, that survival came at a constant cost of stress and loss. Others look at the same evidence and see adaptability, planning, and even moments of relative ease. You feel that tension now. Both interpretations feel possible, because both are true in different ways. Winter was dangerous. Winter was livable. The disagreement is not about facts so much as emphasis. One side points to skeletal stress markers, signs of malnutrition, injuries that healed poorly. These suggest periods when resources ran thin and bodies paid the price. Cold amplifies every weakness. A minor injury becomes serious. A small shortage becomes deadly. Another group focuses on continuity, long-occupied sites, repeated seasonal returns, evidence of children and elders surviving year after year. These suggest that winter, while difficult, was not an endless crisis. People learned to manage it. You realize that part of the disagreement comes from modern expectations. We imagine comfort as a constant state. Anything less feels like suffering. Prehistoric life operated on a different scale. Acceptable conditions were narrower, but expectations were aligned with reality. There is also the challenge of time depth. Winters varied dramatically across thousands of years. Some periods were colder, some warmer. Ice sheets advanced and retreated. No single winter story fits all of prehistory. Debate persists because the past refuses to simplify itself. You think about how evidence survives unevenly. Soft materials decay, plant fibers vanish, feathers disappear. What remains is often the hardest, most durable part of life. Stone, bone, ash. These tell only part of the story. Some researchers caution that the absence of evidence for certain comforts does not mean they did not exist. Others warn against filling gaps with optimism. The balance between caution and imagination is delicate. You feel that balance in your own body as you stand in the cold. You are not suffering, but you are not comfortable either. The truth lives in between. There is also disagreement about how universal these strategies were. Some groups thrived in cold environments, others struggled or moved away. Culture, landscape, and timing mattered. Success was not guaranteed. You notice how this uncertainty mirrors the lived experience of winter itself. Some days are manageable, others are brutal. Memory blurs them together. Archaeology tries to separate them again, piece by piece. A modern aside slips in softly. Think about how differently people remember the same winter storm. One recalls danger, another remembers beauty. Both are honest. You realize that these debates are not failures of knowledge. They are signs of respect for complexity. The past resists being reduced to a single narrative. As you walk, you imagine layers of interpretation, accumulating over the physical layers of the site. Each generation asks different questions. Each finds different answers. Winter remains at the center, shaping inquiry as it once shaped life. Heating enters these debates as a symbol more than a solution. It represents control, comfort on demand, a world where environment bends to human will. Prehistoric winter life shows a different relationship, one of negotiation rather than dominance. Some scholars suggest that this relationship may have been healthier in the long run. Others point out the undeniable improvements in survival that modern heating brought. Both views can coexist. You feel no need to choose sides here. The lesson is not that the past was better or worse. It is that it was different, built on different assumptions. As the sun lowers again, casting long shadows across the snow, you sense how these debates echo the uncertainty of twilight. Not day, not night, a threshold. You carry that threshold with you as you move on. The knowledge that winter survival was neither simple misery nor effortless resilience. It was a constant adjustment, interpreted differently depending on where you stand. And perhaps that is why the arguments continue. Because the past, like winter, refuses to settle into a single, comfortable answer. You catch yourself comparing without meaning to. It happens quietly, almost automatically. You imagine stepping out of this winter world and back into your own, into a room where warmth hums invisibly through walls and floors. The contrast is jarring now that you have lived here for a while, even in imagination. You think about how your body behaves in modern cold, how quickly fingers stiffen, how intolerable a draft feels, how cold becomes an interruption rather than a condition. That difference did not come from weakness. It came from design. Modern life is built to remove cold from daily awareness. You picture yourself waking in a heated home, temperature controlled, air still. The day begins already warm. Your body does not need to prepare. It simply exists. That comfort feels pleasant, but it also feels strangely passive when held against the life you have just experienced. Prehistoric bodies were never passive in winter. They were always responding, adjusting, reading signals. Modern bodies often wait for systems to respond instead. There is research that hints at this shift. Studies on thermal comfort show that people accustomed to climate control tolerate narrower temperature ranges. Discomfort arrives sooner. Adaptation happens slower. The body forgets how to negotiate. You feel that truth in your own imagined muscles. Here, cold is expected. At home, it feels like an error. Expectations shape sensation more than we realize. A modern aside drifts in gently. Think about how uncomfortable you feel when a building is a few degrees cooler than expected. Not freezing, just different. The reaction is immediate. Annoyance, tension. That reaction itself burns energy. You realize now that prehistoric people conserved warmth partly by conserving attention. Cold was not constantly monitored. It did not demand emotional response unless it crossed a threshold. That saved energy, as surely as fat or fire. You think about clothing again. Modern winter clothing is often designed for short exposure. A walk from car to door, a brief commute. Layers are chosen for convenience. Here, clothing is chosen for continuity. It must work all day, all night, across activity and rest. You imagine trying to survive this winter with modern habits, standing still too long, expecting warmth to appear when you stop moving, feeling frustrated rather than responsive. The mismatch becomes obvious. This does not mean modern life is wrong. Heating has saved countless lives. It has reduced illness. It has expanded where people can live. But it has also changed the relationship between body and environment. Some researchers suggest that this change has costs beyond energy use. Reduced cold exposure may affect circulation, immune response, and metabolic flexibility. The body adapts to what it experiences. Remove challenge, and certain abilities fade. You feel no urge to romanticize the past. Winter here is hard, risky, unforgiving, but it is also honest. The body knows what is happening and responds accordingly. You notice how prehistoric people did not seek uniform warmth. They tolerated variation. Cold hands, warm core, cool air, warm ground. Comfort was uneven and accepted. Modern life strives for sameness. You think about how much energy modern systems spend creating that sameness, heating entire buildings to maintain a single temperature, fighting physics constantly. Prehistoric systems worked with gradients instead of erasing them. There is still debate among scholars about how much modern humans could regain cold tolerance if environments changed. Some argue adaptation would happen quickly. Others believe generations of insulation have shifted expectations too far. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. You imagine stepping outside your home tonight and staying there longer than usual, feeling the cold settle, breathing through the initial discomfort, not as a challenge, but as an observation. The idea feels unfamiliar, but not impossible. You realize that the question was never why prehistoric people did not need heating. The deeper question is why they did not expect it. Expectations drive design. Design drives habit. Habit reshapes the body. As evening approaches again in this imagined world, you feel how natural it has become. The cold no longer feels like something to solve. It feels like a condition to move within. You think about how many modern anxieties revolve around comfort loss, power outages, fuel shortages, broken systems. Prehistoric life had no single point of failure. Warmth was distributed across many small, resilient practices. This does not make it better. It makes it different. Resilience, rather than control. You stand still for a moment and feel the cold air against your face. You do not flinch. You understand now that this calm response is learned. It was learned by millions of people, over tens of thousands of winters. Modern bodies still carry the capacity for that calm, even if it is rarely used. As you walk on, the comparison softens. You no longer judge either world. You simply see them more clearly. Heating changed human life profoundly, but before it, people did not wait to be warm. They arrange their lives so that warmth emerged naturally from movement, food, shelter, and community. And in understanding that, you carry forward a quiet respect for both worlds, the one that survived without heaters, and the one that built them. You slow your pace now, not because the cold demands it, but because the journey is nearing its natural pause. The landscape around you feels familiar in a way that surprises you, not comfortable exactly, but understandable. Winter no longer feels like a puzzle to solve. It feels like a set of quiet rules you have learned to follow. You think back over everything you have experienced, bodies trained from childhood, fat and food used deliberately, movement chosen over stillness, shelters shaped low and close to the ground, earth used as insulation, animals observed, borrowed from, respected, clothing layered without tailoring, fire invited briefly, then dismissed, migration timed carefully, clustering embraced without hesitation, sleep shaped by posture, rituals softening fear, tools reducing effort. Wind read like a language, limits acknowledged, evidence left behind, debates continuing, modern comfort contrasted. None of these things alone explain survival. Together, they form a web. Cut one thread, and the rest hold. That is the lesson. You realize now that prehistoric people did not ask how to stay warm in winter. They asked how to live in winter. Heating, as you know it, answers the first question. Prehistory answered the second. You look at your hands again. They are not warm by modern standards. They are usable. That is enough. Survival rarely requires perfection. It requires adequacy, repeated consistently. There is a quiet humility in this way of living. No attempt to dominate the environment. No illusion of control. Just participation. You adjust. Winter responds. A balance holds for another day. You think about how this reframes resilience. It is not about toughness in the dramatic sense. It is about alignment. When expectations match reality, stress drops. When stress drops, warmth lasts longer. Some researchers suggest that this alignment was humanity's greatest early advantage. Not strength, not intelligence alone, but flexibility, the ability to change behavior faster than the environment changed conditions. You feel that flexibility in yourself now. The imagined cold does not bother you the way it once did. You know what to do with it. That knowledge brings calm. As the day fades, the group gathers again, movements unhurried. Everything has its place. Nothing is rushed. Winter will do what it does. You will do what you do. Heating was unnecessary because warmth was never treated as a commodity. It was a relationship. You settle down one last time, body folding inward, layers adjusted, breath steady. The cold remains outside, present but contained by habit, awareness, and shared life. And as you drift toward rest, the story softens. The wind outside loses its edge, becoming a distant sound rather than a threat. Your breathing slows further, each exhale long and even. Muscles release their last tension. The ground feels solid beneath you, holding warmth gently, like a memory that refuses to fade. You no longer need to imagine surviving this winter. You already are. Thoughts blur at the edges now. The details you carried so carefully begin to loosen their grip, not because they are forgotten, but because they are no longer needed. Understanding has settled into something quieter. You feel safe enough, warm enough, held by layers of knowledge and time. Somewhere far away, in a different world, heaters hum and lights glow. Here, there is only breath, earth, and the slow rhythm of life moving through cold without fear. You let your eyes close. There is nothing left to solve tonight. Only rest. Only warmth that does not need a name. Only the steady knowledge that humans have been here before, many times, and found their way through. Sleep comes gently now, carrying you with it, as winter passes quietly outside. Sweet dreams,